In 1922, archaeologists cracked open a tomb in Egypt. 3,000 years of darkness, and inside it, they found food, dried fruit, grain, all of it dead, except one thing. A jar sitting in the corner, golden, thick, perfectly intact. And one of the archaeologists tasted it, and it was good, not sour, not rotten, 3,000 years old, and it still tasted good. And that raises a question you can't shake. How? Because think about it. Leave a banana on your counter for 5 days. It rots. Milk left out overnight? Gone. Even things specifically designed to last eventually go bad. But honey just stays. Not for years, not for decades, for thousands of years. And once you understand why, you realize honey isn't just a food. It's one of the most sophisticated structures nature has ever built. Engineered by an insect with a brain smaller than a sesame seed. But let's slow down, because most people, when they hear this, think, oh, it must be the sugar. And they're right, but dangerously incomplete, because sugar alone explains nothing. Corn syrup has sugar, it goes bad. Jam has sugar, it goes bad. Condensed milk has sugar, it goes bad. So what does honey have that none of them do? It's not one thing, it's three. 3 layers working together, like a security system. The first layer is water, or more precisely, the absence of it. This is where it starts getting interesting. Every bacteria, every fungus, every microorganism that spoils food needs water to survive, not to drink, to exist. Every single process of decomposition depends on moisture, and honey has less than 20% water content. The rest is sugar in extreme concentration, and that concentration does something brutal to any microorganism that lands in it. There's a process called osmosis, and what happens is simple but devastating. A bacterium lands in the honey. The environment around it is so concentrated that it starts pulling water out of the bacterium's own body. It dehydrates from the inside out and dies before it can do anything at all. It's like trying to swim in a sea of pure salt. You don't drown, you shrivel. But here's the problem. Because honey, when exposed to air, absorbs moisture. When that happens, the concentration drops, and honey can ferment, can spoil. So that first layer alone isn't enough to hold. It needed something more. And the second layer is where things start to seem impossible. Because bees deposit an enzyme inside honey called glucose oxidase. And when that enzyme comes into contact with any trace of moisture, it produces something. Hydrogen peroxide. Yes, the same compound you put on a cut to kill bacteria, honey manufactures on its own, automatically. Every time it needs to. It's a defense system that activates itself. No refrigeration, no preservatives, no external trigger. And you're looking at this every time you open a jar. But there's still a third layer. And this one is the strangest of all, because it has to do with something most people would never connect to honey. Acid. Honey is naturally acidic. pH between 3 and 4.5. To put that in context, orange juice sits around 3.5, meaning honey is about as acidic as fruit juice, and the microorganisms that cause decomposition simply cannot survive in that environment. So you have 3 systems running at the same time: dehydration through osmosis, automatic hydrogen peroxide production, an acid environment that eliminates whatever's left. 3 barriers, in layers, all working together. This isn't luck. It isn't coincidence. It's engineering, built by millions of years of evolution. And you've been putting it in your tea. But here's the twist almost nobody knows. Because everything I just told you only applies to pure honey. And there's one thing that destroys all 3 layers at once. Something simple. Something most people do without thinking twice. A dirty spoon. Think about it. You just ate yogurt, or scooped some peanut butter, and then you grab that same spoon and stick it in the honey jar. Seems harmless, it's just a second. But in that second, you introduced moisture, food residue, microorganisms. And remember the first layer of protection. It depends on honey having less than 20% water content. When you contaminate it with wet residue, that percentage climbs. And when it climbs, osmosis stops working. And without osmosis working, the bacteria that used to die on contact now survive, and they get to work. 3,000 years of natural protection, undone by one unwashed spoon. That sounds like an exaggeration. It isn't. It's exactly what food scientists and beekeepers warn about. Pure honey sealed, kept dry. It can last indefinitely. Honey contaminated with moisture. It can ferment in weeks. And here's something nobody tells you. The honey you buy at the grocery store probably won't last thousands of years. Not because it's fake, but because it went through a process called pasteurization. High heat, applied to kill wild molds and yeasts. And that process destroys some of the enzymes, including glucose oxidase, the one that produces hydrogen peroxide. So pasteurized honey loses one of its 3 protective layers. It still lasts a very long time, far longer than almost any other food. But it's not the same thing as raw, unprocessed honey. And once you know that, you look at labels differently. Pure honey is not the same as raw honey. Organic honey doesn't mean unpasteurized. They're different things, and the industry has no obligation to explain that to you. But there's one more layer to this story. Because honey was never just a food that preserved itself. It was used for thousands of years to preserve other things. In ancient Greece, warriors who died in battle were preserved in honey for transport back home. In Egypt, fruits and meats were stored in honey for long journeys. In medieval medicine, wounds were packed with honey to prevent infection. No antibiotics, no modern dressing, just honey. And it worked. Because everything that stops honey from spoiling also stops things inside it from spoiling. The same system, applied differently, by civilizations that never knew each other existed, separated by oceans and centuries, all arriving at the same answer. And today, NASA is actively studying honey as a potential preservative for long-duration space missions, because in space, with no refrigeration, no controlled atmosphere, you need something that maintains itself. And after thousands of years of human use, the best answer science has found is still honey. An insect, flying flower to flower, built something that aerospace engineers still haven't been able to beat. And that leaves you with a question that doesn't go away. If something as simple as a jar of honey hides 3 overlapping protection systems, built over millions of years of evolution, designed by an animal with no awareness of what it's creating, what else around you is far more complex than it looks. Because once you start seeing things that way, you can't stop.